Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon-free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. So even if you run a business where a lot of your income and expenses are pretty regular, pretty routine, and based on subscriptions or based on recurring monthly expenses and revenue, the one thing that tends to shake things up is when you have business travel. And business travel comes with a lot of different pieces to it. I mean, I just got back from a business trip and I had so many Lyft receipts, so many, meals, so many receipts to keep track of, and then all the upcharges from the airlines, the bag fees, the tips, and so on that you have to keep track of. And it can be really cumbersome to track the business travel. Now, if you have employees, I'm going to let you in on a different approach that you can take that might simplify business travel deductions for you. And if you are, struggling with keeping track of things in your business, I do recommend having an organized, a trip portfolio, if you will, whether that's virtual or whether that is physical, that if you are going to keep track of your expenses, that you do so in an organized way so you can actually go back to, because these are really highly scrutinized, go back to the business purpose of the trip, to go back to the meals that you had, the hotel receipts, et cetera, that you may need to call on. Also, this also tends to be when, issues come up. Like if you have a discrepancy or you disagree with a charge, you want to dispute it with your hotel or with your credit card company. It's good to have those things on file. It's good to have all the documentation, the original documentation on hand. So keep that in mind that if you are going to use all of the expenses, that you should keep good track of these, especially for business trips, because those tend to be A, more expensive, and B, a little bit more complicated and questionable at times. But if you really want to simplify things, let's say you have a company where you have employees and those employees travel for business. And I mean, it's hard enough as a solo owner for me to keep track of all that stuff. But if my employees are all traveling and they all have different expenses being pushed through, it's really hard to keep track of what's what. So what I highly recommend is that if you're managing multiple employees and they're all traveling, that you use something called the GSA per diem rates. If you're not familiar with this, a per diem is basically a fixed amount of money that the company gives to employees who are traveling for work. So it's kind of a budget, if you will, to say, hey, you have this much money to spend on meals, on lodging, on any other incidental expenses. So it's kind of at their discretion to budget. So for example, if you give, say, $150 for the day, that means that they can use that on whatever meals they choose, along with any other services that they deem necessary. So that's just a couple of examples. Incidentals could include like tips, luggage fees, could be dry cleaning services and other things at the hotel. It could be meals, all of those things. And per diems generally don't cover transportation costs like the flights, the rental cars, and things like that. That would typically be processed through the employer directly. But what you could do is say, hey, for the cost of money for you to be there, to stay there, we can give you a per diem rate. Now, you might be wondering, okay, well, how do I figure out what that rate is? Well, there's this site with the U.S. General Services Administration, right? I think that's what it's called, the GSA. Yes, General Services Administration. That site, the gsa.gov, I believe, will give you the per diem rates for specific states, for specific areas, because it will vary state by state. And what you want to keep in mind is that this will change. You want to double check that you're always using the current rate, but you can basically give your employees a certain amount of money to use for different incidentals and meals and lodging. The standard per diem rate currently, I believe, is $151, which comprises $55 for meals and entertainment and $96 for lodging. That is the latest data I've seen. It could change. It's always subject to change based on, cost of living and cost of areas, but the minimum wage. But you're going to find that in different areas, you're going to have different per diems. You can also offer more than that. You don't have to do the standard. You can offer a certain amount that's deductible per diem for the employee that can be spent. And there's actually a great tool at gsa.gov. You can actually go online and go to the per diem tool to figure out the location, to figure out how many days you'll be there, and to figure out what your per diems probably should be to be able to cover traveling employees. One thing you can do is you can give the employees the full amount of the per diem ahead of time. You can give it to them in cash, which is a little risky, let's be real. Or you can give them through a company credit card with a specific limit, for example. You could cover a portion of it up front, or you could reimburse them later up to that amount. And I've seen it work in all different ways, but I find that when you give them the upfront payment, it's definitely trickier to keep track of, and it's definitely more risky for you, because I would say reimbursing later is probably the way to go, just to make sure that the trip actually happened, it was completed successfully. Because let's just look at it this way. If you gave a full upfront payment before departure and then their flights got canceled and they went home, like, now you have to get that money back. It's going to be way harder to get the money back than if you had a reimbursement policy. So just like with any other cash flow rule, I would probably err on the side of paying after the fact, but it's up to you, your culture, your team. And you definitely want to make sure that you don't, if you exceed the federal limit of the per diem, then the remaining amount will basically be income to the employees and part of their wages. So keep in mind that there could be tax implications if you are giving them more than the standard amount of per diem. Basically, if there's a flat amount of money given, then you really wouldn't have to do an expense report, which is pretty nice. I know I used to have to do expense reports, and I used to have to keep track of everything, and I had to submit reimbursement requests. This kind of eliminates that whole process. If you have multiple employees who are traveling and they need to submit, for approval, if you give them that per diem based on the number of days, it's way easier to calculate. It's also easier to predict from a cash flow standpoint that you're going to be spending X amount of money, and that the employees aren't going to go nuts, spending money on the company credit card, having, parties or big dinners or, open bar tabs every which way when they go out. So I've experienced that firsthand. And we used to have a company credit card at the firms I used to work for, and we would be able to swipe it left and right, and anything under like $75 never got looked at. So we knew that going in, and as long as it was under 75 per person, we were fine. And I mean, like any other employees, you would basically find a way to invite as many people as possible or, invite people to dinner knowing that this was going to be another addition to the budget. And that happened all the time. But, as a business owner, and for you listening, who you're a business owner, what I would say is you want to be mindful of which ways can, frankly, the employees screw you. Which ways can they spend more of your money than they're entitled to spend or than is necessary in order to accomplish what they need to while traveling. And it's not being stingy. It's more so setting some type of budget to say, hey, this is what I expect it will cost. And if you're going to spend more than that, then basically, you're on your own to do that, or you have to basically get a approval from me on why you would want to spend more. I would probably venture to say that the optimal approach is to offer some type of per diem for the meals and incidentals, and book, let's say, your travel plans through the business directly. And that way, and then if anything goes above and beyond, say, the standard that you're going to offer them, if they want to spend more, they have to get a specific approval to do that, or to put it through the credit card or get reimbursed. So there is a way that you can leverage per diem rates to make your process a lot simpler without really restricting your employees too deeply. It's just an easier way for you to manage how much money is being spent on those things so that you can control the costs. One would think that the IRS and the government would not be a fan of this, because it's like, well, you're giving them more money than they need. Well, the idea is to give them as much that they need, and also to keep them mindful of a budget. So they aren't going to spend more than that. And they're going to keep that item in mind to say, okay, this is how much we believe is reasonable for that particular location. They're going to spend no more than that. And if they chose to, I'm not going to lie, I've chosen to, get, when I was in New York, I chose to get dry cleaning done, and I chose to get other services at the hotel, like room service one night. And I used basically all of my per diem rate for that. And I didn't eat lunch, or I ate lunch on my own dollar, because I knew that my per diem could cover. I just knew I was going to have a late night, and I was like, I just want room service, and I know it's going to use up my whole per diem. It's worth it. but you give your employees that choice of where to place that priority based on the fact that they're traveling for you and they're away from home. So to give them a little bit of freedom is good as well. So I hope that you take this into account, considering that travel expenses are always tricky to deduct. You can use this per diem rate system as well in your business. And I'm going to include more information in the show notes on how you can explore more information about it. But just to make you aware and to make sure you know that this is also an option for your employees as well. One of the things that holds people back from starting their business and going all in on it to grow it is this hesitation around setting it up properly or cleaning things up to make sure everything is legally and compliantly sound. Between setting up the actual business legally and knowing how to manage the money, there's a lot that can intimidate somebody and scare them into not starting. And that's why I bundled up my 5 best resources all together for brand new business owners or for anyone who's looking to clean things up. This is my 5-day mindset refresh because you know it always starts with mindset, and my business financial quick starter, which is my starter course for anyone looking to start a business with all the key elements you need to do in order. My tax deduction guide with hundreds of deductions you can take for your business today. My Money Pro matchmaker on how to find the right professional for you, and my cash flow forecasting mini course. This is the ultimate Swiss Army knife. It includes tools and templates, everything you need to get started on your business successfully or clean things up if you feel like you've fallen behind. Grab your copy right now. The Small Business Starter Kit is yours for free using the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your podcast platform. This small action goes a long way for podcasters to get our message heard by more business owners just like you. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to information about our guests and ways to get in touch with me. We'll see you on the next episode.